This is Lemmy with RevZilla TV. I'm here in a 2015 Honda Goldwing. We're putting this thing through a full RevZilla review. Now, anybody who knows beans about motorcycles knows that if you want to lay down high mileage, you got to be comfortable while you're doing it. In order to properly assess this bike, we brought it to a more bucolic environment than the standard city we usually do stuff in. We're going to take this thing out and do some real-world big mileage on it. Let's go for a spin.
The Goldwing has been Honda's flagship motorcycle for 40 years. 2015 marks the 40th anniversary of the Goldwing's inception. It's been their flagship model for good reason. This is an exceptionally stable motorcycle, and I mean that in two ways, both in terms of its road holding, but also in terms of sales data. This has been a perennial performer for Honda because it's continually redefined the touring segment as far as what amenities should be offered to both a passenger and a rider. Now, as king of the touring heap, this is a motorcycle that has lots of ascendance to the potential throne. I'm thinking specifically of the Harley Road and Electroglide, the BMW K1600 GTL, and the Victory Vision. They all compete loosely with the Goldwing in terms of top-tier bikes that offer lots and lots of rider and passenger comfort. Now, before we get too deep into this review, let's talk about the 904-pound gorilla in the room. This is a large bike. It really does push the boundaries of how big a motorcycle can actually be. As such, it demands a specific buyer. Firstly, the buyer of a Honda Goldwing should be well-heeled. This is not an inexpensive motorcycle. This is also not a great motorcycle for somebody who is small or weak. You have to be accustomed to manhandling a motorcycle, and you should probably be fairly large in order to handle a Goldwing correctly. The other thing, too, you're going to want to have lots of if you're considering a Goldwing is experience. This is simply an intimidating motorcycle. If you don't have years of riding tucked under your belt, the Goldwing might not be the best choice for you. Now, when it came time to review this motorcycle, I knew I was going to have to pile lots of highway miles upon this thing. That's what the Goldwing is made to do, cover ground and leave people feeling good at the end of a ride. Ideally, a touring bike will take some of the hard work out of a long motorcycle journey and leave both rider and passenger feeling refreshed at the end of things. That's the measure of success for me as far as whether or not the Goldwing actually succeeds. Now, we're going to break this thing down RevZilla style. I'm going to talk to you about how it goes, how it stops, and how it handles, of course, but we're also going to have a special section in this from the passenger seat, so you can see what kind of accommodations are provided for the passenger and also what sort of sumptuous accommodations come for the rider as well. You can actually see into the cockpit here. If you've never been in a Goldwing, it really is a different riding experience than you're going to get on some more pedestrian models. Now, because this is a RevZilla review too, we're also going to have our section where we talk about some of the aftermarket items you might want to add to your Goldwing in order to make the bike work a little bit better for you. Now, all that having been said, it's time to throw on your modular helmet and one-piece suit. We're going for a ride.
Now, the Honda Goldwing's drivetrain is a big winner. You can see this flat 1800cc mill down here. This is an awesome engine. It makes all sorts of torque. Now, it only makes 105 horsepower, but there's 125 foot-pounds of torque. You have not experienced a flat torque curve until you've ridden around on a Goldwing. There's power everywhere on the tap. Doesn't matter what gear you're in, when you crank down, there's plenty of power on tap to pull you along. It's not a fast bike, but it's definitely not a slow bike either. Handling on the Goldwing, however, is a little bit different. Now, the Goldwing is not going to get over too awful far, but you can get it farther than you would think. It's a lot more nimble than you'd expect for a 900-pound bike. One of the things I wasn't so fond of, though, was the tires. The tires on here, Bridgestone Excedras, aren't to my liking. I'm usually not too picky when it comes to tires, but the front actually washed out in perfectly dry weather on me. Killed my confidence on this bike, made me feel a little bit shaky when I was really burying this thing into a turn. However, once you're in a turn, it really does feel like it corners on rails. Now, for everything this does give up in the corners, though, it is a fairly good ride. The suspension is fantastic. It really just soaks up all the bumps. It may say Honda back there on the trunk lid, however, this thing is all Cadillac. See, coming through these turns, though, handling really is limited clearance-wise. One of the other things I didn't dig so much about the handling on the Goldwing was unfortunately a nasty head shake we encountered. Our bike only has 6,000 miles on it or so, but when I take my hands off the bars at 35 to 40 miles an hour, I have a bad head shake problem. Now that's probably steering head bearings, but the question becomes, why does a bike with 6,000 miles on it need its steering head bearings replaced? Now let's talk about braking real briefly. Braking on the Goldwing is also a little bit subpar, but again, we have to take into account how large this bike is. You can see these large brake rotors up here and these huge calipers, and they'd be great fare on a sport bike. They'd be fantastic at stopping that. But because the Goldwing weighs so much more, they feel a lot more anemic than your standard brake. One of the other mistakes I think Honda made too was offering no ABS on this base model you can see here. Now you can get ABS on a Honda Goldwing, but you're going to be paying quite a bit for it. You have to bump up 2 packages in order to get the most affordable package that includes ABS. I really think that Honda should offer the base model with ABS. They're probably turning off a lot of potential buyers with respect to that. So as you can see, the Goldwing is no slouch when it comes to street performance, but that's not the entire game here. In order to really succeed as a touring bike, I have to be comfortable on this, as does a passenger. In order to give you a bit of POV from the passenger viewpoint, one of our PAs, Sarah, has agreed to jump on and take a ride with us. I'm going to flip down her footrest to make her just a little bit more comfortable on this motorcycle, and as she jumps up here, I'm going to do a couple other things too. I'm going to adjust my suspension right now. The Honda Goldwing allows you to actually adjust the preload on the rear suspension automatically. You can move up and down on the suspension preload, and the other thing you can do too is adjust the windshield. If I yank these 2 locks here, I can then kind of wrestle the windshield up here. I've struggled a little bit with this. In these days of electric windshields, this seems a little bit antiquated, and I'm sure it's something that Honda will probably address in the next redesign. Now, having adjusted the suspension and the windshield, I think we're about ready to get underway. Sarah, you ready to roll?
Okay.
Cool, let's get out of here. You can see we're out here on the highway, and the highway really can be a rough spot for both rider and passenger. But I think the name of the game as far as passenger accommodations on the Goldwing are concerned is really autonomy. The passenger has a lot of freedom to do all sorts of stuff that they're not able to do on other bikes. You can see Sarah back there has a lot of stuff going on for her. Check out those stash pockets she's got back there. The stash pockets are really nice for her. They let her kind of, stash her stuff, chapstick, sunglasses, without having to rely on me passing things back to her or relying on me to, pull over and let her get into the top box. I really like that. I think it's a really big add-on from Honda. One of the other things I really dug too was her seat. Look how far elevated she is. She has a good view of the horizon. She's got a nice scan there. And the other thing I love about this seat too, because of the dual zone climate control, she's also able to control her own heating back there. I think that's a really big winner as well. The third thing she's got back there too are a set of speakers. I really think the speakers are cool. The speakers really do serve 2 important functions. You can see that she's got those rubber mats on the top. It makes it comfortable for her to use the speakers as an armrest, kind of kick back and change position so she doesn't get fatigued. The other thing I like too is that they're just very good speakers. Instead of relying on these speakers just blowing noise over my shoulders, instead Sarah's actually able to get her own audio experience back there. Now speaking of the audio experience, I'd like to direct your attention up here to the front, to the left side of the fairing. We talked about some of the stuff on the right side of the fairing, but the left side of the fairing really is the audio command center. And you've got all sorts of features and options here. AM, FM, stereo, CB radio, wired intercom, weather band, you name it, you can do it. Now there's a couple wins and a couple losses for me here. Some of the winners, as I said, everything on the left is nice. It's easy to drop your clutch hand down to the buttons and just get something done. The other thing I love too are these nice large buttons. Now some of you are gonna say, Lem, it looks terrible, it looks like a jitterbug cell phone. And I agree, it's a little dated looking, but these actually work. With a gloved hand and just a glimpse out of the corner of your eye, you can stab a button and it does exactly what it's supposed to be doing. Love that. Some of the misses though. First, no 3.5mm audio jack. That kind of stinks. How are you supposed to hook up sound to this? Sure, there's a USB cord in the back, but it's all the way back in the trunk. What are you supposed to do? Run a wire all the way up? That's no good. If you use your cell phone for both directions and for music, you're kind of torn. You have to make a decision there. The other thing I don't really get at all is that there's absolutely no power port on here. I don't know how you can sell a touring bike in 2015 with no power port. In spite of these minor shortcomings though, the Goldwing is an unbelievably comfortable bike to munch some miles on.
Alrighty, now's the part of the video where we talk about potential modifications you might want to think about if you're considering putting a Goldwing in your garage. Now we could make the Goldwing perform better. We could make it stop faster, we could make it go faster, and we could probably even improve the handling. But the truth is the Goldwing's not a performance-minded motorcycle. I think that if you were to undertake any performance modifications, you're probably going to spend a lot of money to mask what is really the underlying truth of the Goldwing. It's a big, heavy bike. It's designed to move people and stuff in comfort. This is a Luxo barge. Embrace it. If I were going to take one of these things home and I was going to make a Goldwing part of my regular fleet rotation, I would make a couple changes playing to the strengths of the Goldwing. I think the first thing I would do is drop a luggage rack on here. A luggage rack is going to do two things for you. The first thing a luggage rack is going to do is give you a place to put something that's either oddly sized or perhaps cumbersome in shape. As it stands right now, if you have something you want to carry along with you that doesn't fit into a saddlebag or the top box, there's not really a way to do it. A top rack solves that problem. The other problem it solves for you is a lash point. If you look at the smooth, sleek bodywork of the Goldwing, you can see here that there's not a lot of places to actually lash down to. The luggage rack provides you not only a place to put something, but also a place to secure it. Now my second modification will probably draw laughter from some folks, but I would embrace Goldwingdom very fully. I think I would equip this thing with a trailer hitch. The Goldwing has plenty of guts. This is great at pulling. It's got all sorts of downstairs torque. It really would be able to handle a trailer with ease. I think it would really let you live life on the road for weeks or possibly even months at a time. Now I had plenty more thoughts on the Goldwing, but we couldn't pack them all into this video. Click that info button, cruise on over to my Common Tread article where I really analyze this thing from soup to nuts. If you're watching us on YouTube, do me a favor and subscribe. Make sure I got a job next month doing these for you guys. As for me, I'm gonna get a little bit more money's worth out of the Goldwing. I'm going for a ride. As always, I'm Lemmy. I'm out of here.